Everyone, and thank you so much for coming out. I know all of you are very busy ending summertime festivities, and I just sent one of my daughters back to school today, so that's all starting as well, and the other one starts on Thursday, so I know there's a lot going on this time of the year, so I appreciate you coming out. It's great to be back here in Fulton and back in Callaway County again. I want to thank the lady from Callaway, Representative Jeannie Riddle, for being here, as well as so many Travis and so many other friendly faces. Appreciate such a great crowd coming out to hear what has truly become one of the most, if not the most important issue of the summer of 2013. I know all of us are engulfed every night with the nightly news about the tragedies going on in Washington, D.C., and an out-of-control, bloated government that seems to be doing everything but its constitutional duties and responsibilities of, I don't know, perhaps passing a balanced budget or defending our borders, keeping us safe from terrorists, both domestic and abroad, working on veterans issues. The list could go on and on of all the things the federal government is not doing. But I'm really proud to say that here in Missouri, we still have a very functional government. And it is bipartisan to a great extent. And up until the election of last year, we had an executive, a leader in this state, who claimed that he stood for the principles that are encapsulated by House Bill 253, which I'm here to talk about today. We had a leader in Governor Nixon who proudly ran on reducing the tax burden for all Missourians, standing with and working with Republicans on making government more responsible to the people, more accountable, more streamlined, less waste, fraud, and abuse. Very proud of the AAA bond rating, of all the true balanced budgets that Missouri has. 49 states have a balanced budget amendment. Very few actually live up to it, which is why less than 10 have that very important coveted AAA bond rating that Missouri enjoys. And so, frankly, I believe that Jeannie and I were really shocked that when push came to shove, this governor who ran on that message, governed that way for 4 years, vetoed a bill that would have allowed all of you and every tax-paying Missourian to retain more of their hard-earned wages in their pockets for their families, for their jobs, or for their communities, knowing, like what we know, that you would spend it better than Governor Nixon or any other elected politician. Lowering Missourians' tax burden is a common sense measure. It's been over 90 years since our last tax cut. I think 90 years is a long enough time to wait for major tax reform. Tax reform is something that's sweeping the nation. Why? Because we're in tough economic times. And Missourians, families, and businesses, they need tax relief. Folks, this is not a monumental change. I actually, and I believe Jeannie, voted for a bill that was much more aggressive, Senate Bill 26. But that bill got hung up along the way in the process. So we did what we frequently do in the legislature. Just because we're a governing majority doesn't mean we don't know how to compromise and work with others. And ultimately, when the governor is the one who has to sign the bill, you do have to have some give and take. So we went back to the drawing board, and we passed House Bill 253 with 103 votes in your Missouri House back in session. 3 Democrats joined 100 Republicans for a bipartisan vote back in April of this year. I believe a supermajority of our Senate colleagues also then voted on that bill and sent it to the governor's desk. The governor waited until long after session was over and all of us had gone back home to our districts, to our families, to our businesses, before he uttered one peep about that bill. And then after we were gone, when he had government all back to himself, he has decided to waste your taxpayer money this summer traveling all over the state in his taxpayer-funded airplane, logging hundreds if not thousands of miles to try and again defeat a measure that was passed in a bipartisan way by a supermajority of your General Assembly. Simple changes that House Bill 253 does. It lowers the maximum individual income tax rate, which most people in our state pay. If you make more than $9,000 in this state, you are paying the maximum rate of 6% that has been in place, like I said, for nearly 100 years. It's time for a change. This bill takes a very conservative, with a small c step, a very modest approach, and lowers that by 0.5% to 5.5% over the course of 10 years. Unlike what the governor said, that's not reckless. That's not some wild experiment. That's a cautious, careful way to do what the rest of the states in this country are doing, who are having job growth, improving their economies, and creating jobs. They're doing two things, folks. They're lowering their tax burdens, and they're either moving to a right-to-work status or they're protecting worker freedom in their states. Phasing in the deduction of 50% of business income with a 10% deductibility, reducing the corporate tax by 3% over the course of 10 years, allowing individuals with an adjusted gross income of less than $20,000, some of those who are at the lowest levels of income, to claim an additional $1,000 of a personal exemption, bringing their total exemption to $3,100 for these low-income folks. Closing loopholes in the sales and use tax. They talk about this every year in D.C. We actually got it done here in Missouri State Government this year. That's going to allow companies from neighboring states to sell and deliver goods to Missouri residents tax-free, something which they currently use to gain an advantage. So we're going to close those loopholes. Again, something that D.C. always talks about. Another item this included was the streamlined sales tax, and it's something the governor promoted. Well, now he doesn't like that portion of the bill. You know, high taxes, and this has been proven. If you look around the country, if you look at the map of the United States and see what states, look at the graphs. Where are the jobs leaving? Where are the jobs going to? High-tax states, high-tax cities, like Detroit, which just declared bankruptcy, like several cities in California, which just declared bankruptcy, results in declines in revenue, losses of population, losses of businesses, and losses of jobs. We've seen this already here in our state. We're stuck in neutral. We've got a great General Assembly that promotes pro-jobs, pro-business legislation, but we've got a governor, an executive, who is not leading by our example, and he's vetoing these measures, which is causing us to remain in neutral and not moving forward. We've lost 24,000 jobs already during the Nixon administration, a total of over 115,000 jobs over the course of this recession. If we continue down this path, revenue is going to decline. And the things that the governor keeps talking about, like education, like social services, like mental health, we keep doing nothing, and those items in our budget will truly be put at risk. House Bill 253 is not the vehicle that's putting those at risk. Doing nothing is putting those budgetary items at risk. Our neighboring states that have modern, current economic development policies, something that Governor Nixon has lacked in the 5 years he's been in office, like modernized tax systems, they're gaining jobs. They're putting their economy back on track. A national study just came out this June that again examined the entire nation. Where are the jobs going in this country? Where is the population moving to? Where are people earning more wages? It's no mistake. In the South and the West. Largely red states governed by aggressive yet conservative leaders who are putting policies into place like House Bill 253. Where are the jobs and the population and the growth being lost? From the Rust Belt, from the East and the Northeast, where people are leaving in droves due to massive taxing schemes, due to massive overspending, bloated systems of government, pension systems like our sister state in Illinois, billions of dollars in the hole. They're not paying their Medicaid providers. They don't know what to do. They're just floundering around. You know, a recent poll was taken across our entire state, huge sampling of Missourians. And what that poll showed in a comprehensive way is that Missourians of both sides of the political spectrum, both sides of the aisle, want lower spending, smarter government, more streamlined government, not a bloated system of waste, fraud, and abuse like we've seen in Washington, D.C. You know, we can just look around the country again and look at what they've done in states like Oklahoma, which several years ago passed a very aggressive tax cut package. They just reported this month record revenue receipts. Let me say that again. They cut taxes in Oklahoma much more aggressively than House Bill 253 does, and they're experiencing record growth in revenue. Tennessee has never had an income tax. They pay their workers on average higher wages than here in Missouri. They are growing their economy. Major corporations are moving there. Their budget is increasing larger and larger than Missouri's every year. What does that mean? More money for education, more money for mental health, more money for social services, but it's not done on the backs of the income producers. The education establishment is siding with Governor Nixon on asking us to uphold this veto. Their position on this is very misguided. I also believe in giving our children a first-class education here in the state of Missouri. Representative Riddle and I, and Jeannie's a former educator, she stands with me on this bill. She knows what true education reform is. She knows that money is not the answer to solving our education crisis here in Missouri. But this bill will not take away from that spending. As I mentioned, if we do nothing, that is much, much worse. If we pass House Bill 253 and override it, my prediction is our budget will grow and there will be more money for education. This battle was had back in the early 2000s when the Republicans first took over the General Assembly. And many of the same arguments that are being utilized now were utilized back then. We had a $1 billion hole in our budget thanks to Governor Holden. And it was Republicans in the General Assembly that put our state back on track to fiscal sanity. We balanced the budget. We had to make some serious decisions. Guess what did not happen? That the education establishment and all the fearmongers back then said. They said there would be less money for education. There's more money for education in our budget now than ever before in our state's history. They said we would have to raise taxes. We haven't raised taxes. We've cut taxes and held the line on taxes over the last 10 years. They said that our budget would shrink overall. Folks, we just passed the largest ever state budget in our state's history of $24.7 billion. All the fear-mongering back then was wrong because these folks do not understand basic economics. Lowering the tax burden on job creators and families and small business owners drives economic growth, provides more economic freedom, and provides more opportunity for all Missourians. And that's why I want to thank Representative Riddle for standing with me strongly on this override. You know, finally, we did have 3 Democrats who bravely crossed the line, the party line, back in April. Representative Ed Schieffer, Jeff Rorda, and Steve Hodges. And I would urge all of us to not only contact your local representatives, your local Republicans and senators, but I'll take help from either side of the aisle. Ask these representatives, will you continue to stand with the taxpayers, with the job creators, with Missouri's families, farmers, and small businesses? Or will you stand with Governor Nixon, who wants to defy the will of what I believe is a supermajority of Missourians, who wants to grow government, increase spending, and who thinks that he knows best how to spend your money and not you? You know, simply put, House Bill 253 is going to provide an opportunity for Missouri to grow our economy and to add more money into our education system and to help all Missourians rise to the top. We can choose to follow the example of states like Texas, Oklahoma, Tennessee, and Kansas, who are growing and improving, or we can look the other way to Illinois, California, look to cities, failed cities like Detroit, and we could follow that example. I encourage all of us to choose the former and encourage your legislators to do the same. Thanks for having me here today.